Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mark Lenhart. I'm the president and CEO of the Wesleyan, and very glad to be joining you here today on our first virtual town hall meeting for our independent living. And I'm going to introduce you a couple of faces that are here on your screen. But first, very excited to have a resident guest with us, Ms. Mary Stevens, who is the resident council president. Mary, welcome.
Thank you. It's nice to be with y'all today.
Well, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate your service, as many others who have led our resident council. I know we'll have some time to talk about priorities and also just kind of an exchange, but some questions back and forth towards the end. And we've got a lot of wonderful people here who can also kind of fill in some of the answers for any questions you might have. So thank you for taking out the time and representing our resident population.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, it has been about 6 months. So let's just, I know there are a lot of faces here that you already know, but we have Georgianne Hewitt, who is our Vice President for Advancement. And I'm going in order that I have on my screen here. Delise Becker, who is my Executive Assistant. Kelly Getz, our Chief Compliance Officer. Bethany Cisneros, our Chief Operating Officer. Eva Carrizales, who many of you know, our residential administrator, and then Jenna Young, who's a recent addition to us. She's our Director of Human Resources. So thank you all for joining. I know we have quite a few people that are joining us live. A little shout out to everybody I know that's in the Hewlett Community Room that's kind of gathered. So hello, we can't see you, but hopefully you can see us. It has been about 6 months since the town hall meeting, and certainly it would be preferable if we could meet with you in person. But I am thankful that we have this time together. One of the things we are excited about is, we've tried to look through communication throughout this pandemic. And one of the things that we have created, which many of you will be utilizing, will be systems like this, webinar conference meetings like this, to actually continue your committee and resident council work by meeting online. So I think, Eva, you're coordinating that. And we'll have either go-to meetings or phone conferences. And much like we're doing in the Hewlett Community Room right now, for those who want to gather physically distance appropriately, we'll be able to gather to do so and then connect everybody. But that way we can continue to have some meetings, whereas before just some of the limitations would have prevented us from getting together. Today, I'm excited to talk to you a little bit about the town hall survey, for which I'm very thankful that all of you took the time to work on. We have remained communicative throughout this pandemic through posting on the website and letters and such. We've had to refine that a bit because there's sometimes communications didn't come through, but we've been trying to correct that and appreciate the feedback we received from our many residents about whether or not they were getting those updates. But this is a great way to formalize and identify those priority issues. We have many, many pages of comments. And we do have some limited time, although I know that we would like to spend 3-4 hours just staring at each other through a computer. We have limited this to about 30-40 minutes just so that we can have some time for some discussion and feedback and then some questions. But what we want to say is this: with the feedback that we received, we've identified what those priority items are based on your comments and responses. Eva will have a list of all of the different concerns and comments to address those. And the town hall meetings aren't the only way to communicate. In fact, many of our residents have called, have sent emails, have sent letters. And when we do, whoever receives them will make those return calls and contacts so we can continue to stay in communication with each other. But we appreciate that and how you've addressed those issues to us as a leadership. And they have been concerns, they've been comments, they've been constructive criticism, things that we just need to make sure that we hear, and we appreciate your concern for the organization and sharing those with us. I do want to I want to carve out just a couple of minutes up front to say that many of you took the time to share comments and compliments and praises about each other. This was really exciting to be able to see how many of you identified just praise for your neighbors and your friends, people who have picked up your newspaper and thrown it onto your porch, or maybe taking your trash bins back up to your door, or helped with walking the dogs or watering some plants or whatever that might be. We also have, I know one of our residents has been an incredible spokesperson who's been seeking answers for getting questions answered regarding voting and bringing all those resources. We're going to talk a little bit about that through today, but really appreciate how you all have lifted each other up. With that have also come compliments and praises for the staff that have worked very hard, teammates that have carried through. This has been challenging in a different way for all of them throughout these a lot of changes, and appreciate how you have mentioned many by name. One of the other things too, I just want to share up front is that you've shared a lot about your feelings and heartfelt concern over teammates that are no longer with us. And we understand that these teammates are not just staff members, they become a part of your lives every single day. And whether it's our decision or it's their decision and ways separate, those are tough. It's just like coming home and then all of a sudden that person is not there anymore. And we certainly share in the pain that you have or the feeling of loss that's associated with that. And a couple of people have asked me, how do we come through that? And I think the only thing I can say to that is, I just ask that as we live and we work together, which we do, that there be the opportunity for continued development of trust, and then a recommitment and focus of the commitment of the organization and its care and services, that we're trying to do what's best for the organization. Because as many of you have pointed out, we are a Christian ministry, and one of the greatest responsibilities we have, in addition to caring for all of you, in addition to being a place that our teammates want to work, is to continue to be a ministry, one that's been going on for nearly 60 years. And of course, our responsibility is to make sure that it continues for another 60 years. So we are sharing with those teammates those wonderful comments and the feedback. We want to share with the residents, people that have been singled out, but just want to let you know how much we appreciate that. Mary, if it's okay, there were a number of topics that were in the questionnaire. And again, it would be very difficult to answer every single question that we have. But there was a prioritization, and these are direct numbers. So for those of you that are number people out there, I'm going to share that with you, but they were scored on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the highest priority and 5 being, not that it was the last priority, but the fifth out of many priorities. And so the results of that are as follows, and then I'll go into the different topics. COVID-19, that probably doesn't come as a surprise. It scored 1.78 out of 5. And so we'll certainly focus on issues related to COVID-19. And then it was the discussion, kind of a brief discussion about kind of the expense and the financial status of the organization and the kind of the impact and what that has on the community. That scored 2.78. Then I'm going to kind of lump these together, dining and meal services and life enrichment and kind of getting back in and how we're opening it and how we're looking at those things. Those were 2.9 and 3.34. And then in the fifth item, coming in at 4.15, was just an update with regards to the strategic planning and growth of the Wesleyan and what's taking place. So Mary, those were kind of the order. Is it okay to just, we can't go into a lot of depth, but to talk about that in that order, will that work?
It works for me, yes.
Great. And what I'll do is, as I talk through each topic, I'll just kind of end it and ask if you have some further questions. And then again, as we get towards the end, we'll put those aside and then we'll open up for other questions. So COVID-19, I'm not going to read through all the statistics, and I'm going to say that because probably many of you are watching the same sites that we are, both for Georgetown and Williamson County and all of Texas and the nation and across the world. But of course, it changes constantly. So, typically our updates are updated about 1 p.m., actually about this time, Central Standard Time, every day. And then we get those calls and we're updated. As you see, Bethany and Kelly and others, we are on calls. Well, I'd like to say it's not every day. It's usually every day, if not several times a week, with the various health agencies throughout at the state and local level and some national levels to keep us updated on what's going on and the impact to us as a provider. I want to qualify this work by saying in the last week or so, it's been better. it's not great, and the numbers are not good, but they are less occurrences, less fatalities, slightly declining positivity rate than it was prior when we had another holiday. And so that's good. We'll take every success that we can in that. Although, like our deputy commissioner from DSHS said yesterday, he is absolutely relying upon all of us as providers to maintain vigilance. With the numbers, even at one, are unacceptable. And so many different agencies are working towards cures and treatments and identifying what can be done. And as he said, really almost every call, that providers like us, various healthcare providers, are standing there on the line of defense to protect people. Now, what I want to say is this: while we have had incredible success in managing and preventing the spread, and I will share with you, in the 5 months that COVID-19 has been here, we've had one positive resident case, and we have had a total of 5 teammates and 1 contractor that were positive. This is out of a client base that we serve of about 600. This is over well over 400 teammates, so over 1,000 people that we interact with. Obviously, the occurrence, even one, is saddening to us, but still, in comparison to people that we work with in the community, other healthcare providers who are in the high double digits and triple digits, the efforts have been the commitment and vigilance to the policies and procedures and the guidance from health agencies, many of the leaders that you see in front of us, but absolutely with the cooperation and sacrifice of our residents and our family members. I mean, it has been a lot because we can't do it without you. And so when people have chosen to abide by those policies, when they've given us information that maybe we didn't see, or hear about things in the community, or are watching their own relationships, that really has been a recipe for success for us. We have followed protocols with regards to quarantine. I'll be honest with you, they change. It's 5 days, it's 7 days, it's 14 days, it's 3 weeks, it's 2 days, it's no quarantine. It goes back and forth. I want to say for Kelly Getz, who's our Chief Compliance Officer, she is constantly in the state of writing policy, because the moment she writes it and it's put into effect, some agency changes it. In talking to Dr. Palazzo a couple of weeks ago out of Williamson County, one of the things that she shared, and this is not a direct quote, but it was the fact of just a general dissatisfaction that the agencies have had a hard time being in alignment. And that lack of alignment has been very difficult in its communication to providers and regular businesses and community people and schools about how to manage people coming in, and whether to wear a mask and not to wear a mask, and what to do, and how to stay in front of each other, but then not be in front of each other. So that's been tough. And it is a novel virus. And so people are learning their way through it, but we do rely upon them for their guidance. Kelly's been involved in that creation along with our nurse educator, Darlene Cantrell, but then also the implementation of those policies and procedures. Bethany and her team through her administrators like Eva, to our teammates through Jenna and their supervisors, and of course, Georgianne. Georgianne has been the mouthpiece for the organization to make sure that we're communicating through letters and our website and everything else. I have to give a shout out to Delise too, who does a very good job of making sure that what I write makes sense. She's taken care of us very, very well. But it really has been a team effort to coordinate all the efforts with Health and Human Services Commission, the Department of State Health Services, County and City Health District of Williamson County, the Governor's Office, CMS, the CDC, any acronym you could possibly come up with, we're probably dealing with most of them. So you can imagine with a community like Georgetown that is nearly 30% over the age of 65, it's been a concern to the community. And we've stayed very communicative with the Chamber of Commerce and the Rotary and everyone else, people volunteering to provide care and services, checking in to see how we're doing. And so that comes from the relationship that the Wesleyan has built and continues to have. And so we even as early as today, we still hear from people asking what they can do for us and how our residents and teammates are doing. We have dedicated, like I shared, Kelly and Darlene as compliance and nurse educator. It is constant education and training for teammates at all levels, not just for our clinicians, but for everybody. And in some instances for people outside. For instance, some of the government agencies don't have to abide by their own regulatory standards for infection control. And so we actually have to enforce those. I think one of my favorites was when Corey, our administrator over at the Wesleyan Skilled Nursing, actually prevented a surveyor from coming into the building because they wouldn't wear a mask and couldn't identify themselves. That's the kind of protection that our teammates have for our residents. And because we need to abide by those practices. And we've communicated that at the policy level that those that are even essential visitors need to make sure that they're adhering to that. We have dedicated full-time staff for screening. We're working on technology for screening devices to help relieve some of that pressure so that we can have those questionnaires. I know that it's onerous. In fact, many of our teammates who have to go to different buildings, limited though that is, they have to go through that process every single time. And it's just that necessary overlay to make sure that the people that live there are comfortable and safe in their homes. And so now we're on the precipice of the government asking for weekly testing. Our organization is entirely in favor of testing, except for the discomfort we know it provides to our residents. The difficulty with that is looking at statewide and nationwide. Some organizations have been giving the testing machine, but no tests to do the tests, which is a little bit like having a car, but no gas. Others have received the testing kits. So they've received a lot of gas, but they have no car to put it in. Others like us, it's an empty parking lot. There is no vehicle and there's no gas. So no testing machine, no test kits. So we've worked with multiple contracted agencies to respond to that. And when we reach out to our friends at the various agencies, they say, well, we want to help you, but we can't because we can't find anyone either. So in spite of that, our relationships have been able to make sure that we're testing and following through our policies and procedures and have been able to allow us to maintain vigilance. That's a very, very 30,000-foot view of COVID-19. I know there's a lot of details. I also know there's a lot of policies and procedures. We're going to be talking about our efforts and designs with regards to opening up and things like that. That's a little bit in our dining room and life enrichment discussion. But Mary, I know that's a lot of information, but are any questions that come out of that particular topic for you or that have come from others?
Well, when you talk about COVID, the first thing that comes to my mind is how the residents here are responding to it. And the first thing, we all gripe because we're closed in and we can't see our families. But in the next breath, every time you ask somebody, how are you? They'll say, as well as can be expected. But we are so blessed and so thankful for our teammates and for the Wesleyan for keeping us safe, and not a one of us had been ill. And we couldn't ask for more than that. And that is a reaction of just about everybody I talk with.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that.
And this may not quite fit in with this topic, but I do have to express how the residents here are so grateful for the teammates. In the dining room with Bob and with Carol and the wait staff in the kitchen, all of them go out of their way to keep us happy and to try to provide meals that we'll appreciate. And most of us do. The same thing goes with housekeeping in every department I could go into. They really bend over backwards to keep us happy. And they do it in every way they can think of. Michelle and all the activities are just incredible. They amaze us every day. And so we're very thankful for that. And that's just not my talking. That's what I hear every day. So
well,
thank you for that.
Absolutely. Thank you. We will absolutely be sure to share that with the teammates. In fact, we actually are going to be having a teammate town hall meeting just like this on Thursday for all of our teammates to kind of give them updates. Without a doubt, like I said, our teammates have been a part of that formula. The fact that our residents show that appreciation. And I've heard from multiple residents that said it's whether I'm sick, they're sick or not, their responsibility is to protect others and follow the policies. And I really do appreciate it. And it has been a sacrifice. Nobody wants to wear a mask. Nobody wants to prevent people from coming in. Many of our teammates have even sequestered themselves from other family members in their own family because of this circumstance. And so I appreciate that. Appreciate you sharing that. Is now a good time to transition into a little bit of our discussion about financials?
Yes, I think that's a topic that everyone wants to hear about.
Sure. I think what I might do is add a little bit, just because the consideration of time, is to talk a little bit about also the project and development that's taking place. So, you know, we have, of course, very smart men and women throughout our organization who live here, who've operated businesses and have been in the business place. And you know as well as I do that the cost of managing COVID-19 has been a significant impact to everybody. Because of the nature of being a ministry and being involved in programs like state and federal programs like Medicaid and Medicare, we have been a provider who've been a part of some of the stimulus packages that are supporting providers like us, which have really helped. And so while we remain financially strong, and let me share with you what that means. So we have phone calls with our bond investors, our investment groups where the endowment exists, and just a financial committee from the board in making sure that we're meeting covenants and meeting financial goals, and we're doing all of those. In fact, with regard to our covenants, we're exceeding those covenants because our comfort level isn't just meeting them, it's actually being beyond them. That's our comfort level, is being very conservative and being good stewards of our resources. I think that the question is, with stimulus dollars coming in, those things don't continue forever. And so our operational efforts have been to make course corrections throughout the organization, not out of crisis, not out of the fact of an inability, but looking further down the road. The responsibility of the teammates that are in front of you and then also not on screen are to manage really in two places at once: where we are today, and then also where the organization is going. And so a couple of major benchmarks in that was the ultimate transition of our resident population from the scenic over to Wesleyan skilled nursing. That is something that had been talked about, 10, 12 years prior to my arrival, was something that the team was dedicated to. You can imagine the costs associated with operating a 43-plus-year-old building. And having two different populations. And so economies of scale have been created by combining those populations into the Wesleyan skilled nursing. It does not take away from the emotional deficit from losing scenic. In fact, I will tell you, one of my first board meetings with Leading Age Texas nearly 20 years ago was with Chris Spence, and it was at scenic. In fact, I was there when they modified it and they added the chapel in the front entry. So it's hard to see it go away. But to realize the fact that that mission continues in the combination of populations of Wesleyan skilled nursing makes a lot of sense. In addition, we had offices that were leased across from scenic because of where it was located. We have since done away with that, and we've brought people in here. That is expediting a goal that was already in place, because when we've talked about expansion, we've talked about a centralized corporate office on our current campus. And so we moved that forward just to alleviate the pressure of rent and lease space and utilities. And I feel very strongly that by being proactive and working with my teammates through things like group purchasing arrangements to maximize bulk purchasing, and group purchasing for things like utilities, and how we manage our supplies, and retaining staff versus turning over staff, and making these other operational course corrections, doing a number of those things prevents us from having to make major cuts or major changes. So the response that we got back in our most recent covenant conversation was it went extremely well. In fact, the financial group with whom we did the financing for the acquisition of the skilled nursing said it was probably one of the best meetings that they had. We were well prepared. And not only did we share about our strategic planning in addressing the impact of COVID-19, but we were actually one of the few groups that actually provided a plan that goes beyond COVID-19. And we need to be looking at both. So one of the things I would say, and this is a general theme throughout, is we have had a lot of communication with our board members about operations, but certainly financial. Strong board members who are chairing and leading and asking the questions about the impact. how are we taking care of our residents? How are we taking care of our teammates? What are we doing? How are we planning for next year? We did opt to start working into the budget process for 2021. Gosh, team, what, about as early as May, so that we could really kind of get a jump ahead and come up with a number of scenarios about moving forward. One of those items that I know that will be of significant importance is people have talked about rent and what that impact is going to be. We have not finalized the budget yet, but I think it will be well received, and B, we are taking into consideration for our residents and for the people that we serve, not only our continuance of charitable support and subsidy, which is one of the reasons we exist, but also understanding that people have fixed incomes. In addition to fixed incomes, they've also had a financial impact of COVID-19 to the retirement fund and to their investment dollars. So all of those things are being monitored. We're getting feedback from the financial institutions and another research group that we use, as well as our own financial team, to give us that feedback, so that when we look at how we budget for next year, we take all of those sensitivities into consideration. So I know that's not a percentage number right now, but I think that'll be a good discussion when it comes out, and understand that we just want to make sure that we're continuing to provide the services that we do, and that some of the services that many of you have come to us for, we haven't been able to do because of COVID-19. And that is recognized. Not that we don't want to, but in some instances we can't. So we do take that into consideration as we're looking at budget. If I can flip a little bit to our development and strategic plan. So there's really two parts to a strategic plan. The first part I will tell you is the planning and preparation. One of the outcomes of that has been all of your efforts of communication and expectation, as well as the heroic efforts of our city council and the mayor to get a traffic light at Williams Drive and Estrella Crossing. We know they've continued to do research on that. It is priority number 2. Very thankful, not only that they heard from you and from us that was a priority, but also that we don't have to pay for it. I'm very, very excited for us with that particular outcome, and certainly the right thing to do for us as a community. So I know that we would not have been able to get that done without the efforts of our residents speaking out on behalf of them as residents of this community, and on behalf of the Wesleyan, and our city council who listened to it. That was important. But the process for what we financed, which is the engagement of the architect, the landscape architect, engineers, the general contractor, and the development consultants, to look at all the things that come with a strategic plan. All of those things, we've met our timelines. And so we're in the process of getting the final schematic design, which gets into really the weeds of all the individual units and what units we're going to do, and the unit mix, and what's going to be provided at all the different levels. And then going to the general contractor and getting what's called a GMP, or a guaranteed maximum price. And so with all of that comes a number of different, I refer to them as buckets, that all have to line up. The first is we have to get that price. We have to know what expansion costs this organization as an operation, and that it is that it's in alignment with the ministry of the organization. Growth is good, but all growth and growth all at the same time is not necessarily good. And what impact has COVID-19 and the impairment of that process, how has that impacted our strategic plan? The second is what resources can be brought. There might be financial resources that can be brought to it, or the financial market may have changed. The city is very much involved in dealing with the COVID-19 crisis. So does that impact permits? Does that impact licensing? We don't know. From the standpoint of a general contractor, being able to bring not only the material resources, but actual labor resources. We're kind of lining all those things up. So again, we have brought in the incredible engagement of our strategic planning committee of the board, the finance committee of the board, and then of course it goes to the board in general to talk about all those different facets. But up to this point, our responsibility is to move all those things forward, and we'll be having those plans. Once they're finalized, we're looking to be able to share those designs with you so you can see what's going to take place. Just as a reminder, a part of the strategic plan is the expansion of independent living apartments, the expansion of assisted living, which includes additional memory care and support, the expansion of Wesleyan skilled nursing to have memory care and support, memory care has been a very underserved portion of Georgetown, and really has a need in this community. In addition to the amenity center that we've talked about with an indoor pool and aquatic therapy and other resources, as well as the centralization of our corporate office and a workshop to bring all those things together. And then, of course, how it's connected and significantly more parking. And I will kind of finalize my strategic discussion by saying, we know that in the past, waivers were asked for in prior construction to reduce the number of parking spaces. Not only are we adding more parking, but we're actually going back to what those waivers were and making up the difference by adding parking that would have been in place prior to. So we certainly know, now we don't want to make it a concrete flat, view. We want to keep the views, but to add that parking in. I talk fast, and that's very quick in the financial portion and the strategic plan. So Mary, the unfortunate question to you is does that answer the questions, or what other questions might you have?
I think you pretty well answered it. We are aware of the 2 new temporary parking lots that have given those people who have come into our buildings to work temporarily, we understand, until the building is completed, where your offices will be, as I understand it. And we're grateful for that extra parking, because it happens daily. People don't realize they're parking into somebody's place.
Right.
And of course, that upsets them. But yeah, I think you gave a pretty good overview of what we can look to. And thank you for that.
Sure. I know we have limited time. I just want to check in. I think we're probably about 30 minutes in. If we've got a few more minutes, I think one of the items that's very important that we have not hit on is opening up. Opening up in the dining room. I'm going to throw some things out, but I'm going to ask for Eva and Bethany and others to chime in on this. I know we have not just started looking at opening. We actually been looking at opening from the very beginning. It's always prepared for that. The reason why we haven't, well, obviously, is because of the executive health order, and of course, we're limited as a community. But also, we're also paying attention to what's happening across the state. And I have an unfortunate example from a colleague up in Dallas who has a community very similar to ours. And their news said, oh, by the way, there's some opportunities to open up. And so they did. And then they were shut down 3 days later because they no longer met the criteria to be open. And then a few days later, they met the criteria and they opened it back up again. And then about 48 hours, they shut it down again because they didn't meet the criteria again. And so as you can imagine, residents, teammates, family members are going, what is going on? You're open, you're shut, you're open, you're shut. It's like a revolving door. They opened again, and the last time they opened, within 12 hours of them announcing opening, they already had to shut it down again because they no longer met the criteria to be opened. We want to open safely. We want to open in a way that adds to life, that doesn't disrupt it, so that we don't want to say we open just for the sake of opening and then take it away in 24, 48, 72 hours. So we're working through that process. What does that mean for independent living? I know the bistro, we're going to start opening the bistro for our independent living residents. It will not include teammates at this time. We want to limit that, but we do want to open that up for everyone. I know we're going to be looking at some, dining. Do we want to talk a little bit about dining and how that's scattered? Bethany, can you share with us a little bit about how that's going to be structured?
Yes. So thanks, Mark. Yeah, we're very excited. Kelly and Eva and Bob and I have been in many discussions. We originally looked at reopening dining in July, and then, the surge hit. So we had to kind of dial it back. And again, want to be very strategic about how we are planning this reopening with the goal that things are able to remain open. And of course, it takes all of us working together. So we're very appreciative for all the residents and the teammates who are following the guidances and wearing their masks, practicing good hygiene and hand hygiene. That's how we are going to be able to be successful in keeping things open. So we started a small group activity reopenings yesterday. So we hope that you guys see a lot more engagement. We certainly feel and understand that the need for connectedness was very important. So we opened up the small group activities yesterday. The plan for the bistro is is slated right now for an opening date of September 15th. So a little less than 2 weeks away. Bob and his team are hard at work ordering items to rope off areas and to help with traffic flow, training on the procedures for that with their team as to how to clean and disinfect and how to take orders and set up deliveries, those kind of things. So we're slated for that bistro opening on September 15th. It will be open for to-go orders only. And we'll send out more instruction. I believe the instruction is set to go out next week to everybody so that everybody will understand the hours and what menu will be available and how that will work. Then we would like to plan for October 1st is our target date to open our dining rooms. Of course, they will be in a limited seating capacity because we do have to follow the state of Texas requirements for communal dining settings. So it will be limited seating, but we'll have multiple times for dining with the goal of being able to really welcome everybody back into the dining room spaces. And we're strategically spacing these out to make sure that should we have any adverse outcome, should we have a case of COVID, that it would help it to be able to track back to perhaps where that originated from. So that was a brilliant idea by Kelly. As you guys know, she's super smart, and I was ready. I was like, let's open everything. And she's like, but if we have a case, then we won't know if it was from an activity or if it was from the bistro or from the dining room. And it makes sense to be able to do that. So that's our soft plan. We're excited for it. We're working towards it. And we're going to work really hard to try to keep these things open once we open them up.
Bethany, thank you. I appreciate that. I will say we have some experience. Not only have we had multiple surveys in our buildings, Health and Human Services, Williamson County. Not only have all of them been cleared, not all of them have been complimentary. They've actually borrowed policies and procedures that we've created, Kelly and her team and others have created to use in other facilities because of our success with that. So I can't take credit for that. Again, we have a wonderful team who's made that commitment and very thankful of that support that we've received. Mary, there's a lot. I mean, there really is a lot more to go through, so many more questions. One of the reasons why we want to make sure that we have those subcommittees and committees and communication and continuing through. But let me come back to you again. What other questions do you have maybe that have been brought to you that you'd like to make sure we're talking about?
Well, you've addressed most of them. I was kind of looking at my list. One of the things that the residents are most concerned about is not being able to have visitors, their families, their friends. Perhaps one of the first steps could be considered is at least doing it outside. Our residents enjoy going outside and have places to sit and the trail. And if we could reach that point, that would help them with that. And so that's something we can discuss. Landscaping
and visitation is a part of our conversation for opening and what that looks like. And I know, again, there's been a variety of success for that in the Texas area. Probably this week, it's probably nicer to be outside than it was last week. But yes, I mean, I think we certainly will be looking at that. And part of it is we know very well the seriousness with which our residents safeguard each other. And we know that they will communicate that externally. But as you can imagine, as Bethany and Kelly have talked about contact tracing, we can contact trace through all of our residents and else because we know who they interact with. It just becomes exponentially more challenging to manage that when it comes from the outside. So it's not an insurmountable issue, it's just more challenging.
One of the others has to do with landscaping. And that is something one of the council's committees has worked on very diligently. And we all like to have the pretty flowers and trees in the yards. And so there we're talking about the sprinkler systems. Some work, some don't. And we know that's being worked on and we appreciate that. One of the things here for women particularly. And we have some women that they need help in washing their hair and setting it and all because their arms can't reach up to their heads. So they depend on the beauty salon. And we've had a lot of difficulties with that. And we're hoping that through small group discussions or whatever, that we can get that worked out, because a lot of these people need that. We women, even when we're older, like to look good. We want our hair to look good. And when our hair looks good, then we feel good. So that's something that's really important to us.
Understandable. That makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of head nodding. I don't know if you can see that, but lots of head nodding.
And then I mentioned parking, and you've talked about it too. We're supposed to be getting our carport roofs changed,
yes.
And they were working very well on it, and then it stopped. And of course, they started again today, but then there was some rain, and we think that stopped them again. So we just like to be well informed when these things happen. And I guess that's one of the things that I would highly recommend, and I think they'd all ask for it, is lots of communication, lots of interacting, getting our residents to know your teammates. And if they'll come and meet with us and talk with us on any subject, that would help tremendously. Other than that,
I appreciate that invitation. I will say a couple of things. I know Eva's putting out a letter, but I also know that there's been a challenge in sometimes people receiving those letters. And I know Eva herself and her teammates have run over, Johnny on the spot to make sure that those get over. Sometimes it's been through emails. Sometimes those emails don't work, and so we're continuing to work on that. And that's very, very important. I think that I'm very excited that our committees will be able to start meeting. I think that's a good thing. That's something that's been missed. Certainly, without a doubt, the beauty shop. I think actually Bethany had a conversation with them yesterday, and shared those concerns. So those concerns are coming through us and through the people that need to. But we want to make sure that we're having those communications. So I know Eva's committed to having those conversations and keeping that open. And I think we've been using the mailboxes, Eva, is that correct? Or taking them and putting on doorsteps and using email, a couple of different things?
I was going to say, in most of the notices that we're giving out or communication that we're sharing with residents, we're delivering it to the cubbies, to the doors, to the cottage doors to ensure that everybody receives them timely.
Absolutely. Mary, what else?
Well, I think you've covered most of the key topics that I had in mind. I do think that if you talk to each of us individually, we each have a different concern,
sure.
But you've covered them to a point. And, that's all we could expect right now. If we can get past COVID, I think things will look a lot better. And I have to say again, the people, the teams, have done an amazing job. They are incredible workers. And we're so grateful for it. Even if we do complain about everything, we still know deep down that we are very, very blessed, and we're happy for it. Our council met for the first time like this on Zoom, or it was a go-to meeting. And we were able to, first of all, learn how to do it. Some of them had never done it. But we were able to touch on these very topics. We weren't able to get into a deep discussion, but at least they were brought to the surface. And we hope that we're able to continue that monthly meeting, or even more often with small groups if needed. Next week, I'm meeting with the new people who've moved in during the pandemic, and they've been so closed in, it's hard for them. And so we're going to have a small meeting with them next week to talk with them and let them talk with other new people and get their concerns out so that we can address them and get them involved. So all in all, we complain a lot, but we really are happy.
Well, I will share two things I'll tell you. One, I think the importance of knowing who people are makes a big difference. one of the things Bethany had come up with this as an idea was with Touchtown, which a lot of people get information from, was to have a number of our new teammates that are now officing there is to do just a picture and a bio about who they are. And we can do that for everybody, so that they're with that kind of repetition and coming through, that people can start to get to know who we are again, and see some new faces that are in the building. And really appreciate you taking the time to go through and go these questions. I know there's a lot, and I know we've missed some. I know that people are saying, but talk about this. We said we go about 30 minutes. It's 45 minutes now. That's nearly a record for me as far as a brief amount of talking, as many of you know. My assistant's nodding her head repeatedly. But thank you for those. We know that you're out there and you can't, we don't see your faces. Thank you for taking the time to listen. Thank you for allowing us to have Mary join us. Team, thank you for being here. Appreciate you sharing what you have. We are thankful for the Wesleyan. And as a resident, my last comment is, a resident shared with me the other day, they were very upset about something. And they shared with me what it was. And they said, if these were different times, it might be, I might feel differently. But if I didn't care about the Wesleyan, if I didn't care about where I lived, if I didn't care about my neighbors and the people that work here, I wouldn't complain. And there's that genuineness and that feeling for something greater than just the people that are here, this ministry that goes on, that is important. And Mary, and I think you said it very well, is the concerns, the complaints, the compliments are a testimony to people and how engaged they are. It's not just coming in and shutting the door. When I hear about the fact that you're meeting with those who've come in during this time to make sure they're connected, that's what community is about. So thank you for being a part of that success for us. Thank you all for joining us. It'll be available for some time for people to either rewatch if you want to, or for people to watch the first time. So thank you very much, and have a good afternoon and live life abundantly.
Thank you.
Thank you.